So I want you to understand that eating sugary food is not going to cause diabetes mellitus. Let us stop the spread of misinformation, honestly. So yeah, diabetes mellitus, it's a hormonal problem, and the hormone that is responsible for this is the insulin hormone. This insulin hormone, now what it does is that it takes glucose out of your bloodstream into the cells that needs it, the tissues, the liver for storage and all that. So usually when you eat a carbohydrate meal, or things that contains sugar and all that, this carbohydrate is broken down into smaller units, primarily the glucose. And this glucose, it gets into the bloodstream, and your body signals the pancreas to release insulin to remove this glucose out of the bloodstream. So that is what insulin does. So now in diabetes mellitus, I'm just going to talk about the type 1 and the type 2. The type 1, it is primarily caused by the autoimmune destruction of the cells that produces this insulin. And what this basically means is that your own body produces antibodies and everything that fights the cells that produces insulin, and it goes on to destroy it. And when it is destroyed, the cells will no longer produce insulin, and then glucose will keep piling in your bloodstream because there is no insulin to remove this glucose from your bloodstream and send it to where it is needed. So over time, this accumulation of glucose now results in what we see as diabetes mellitus. But this type 1 diabetes mellitus, it is mostly hereditary and it is not very common. So now the very common one is the type 2 diabetes mellitus, and this is caused as a result of certain things which I'm going to explain. And the first thing is a situation where there is a dysfunction in the cells that produces this insulin, and this is where your intake of carbohydrate meal plays a role. Even your lifestyle, your everything, this is where it comes into play. So when you live a sedentary lifestyle, it goes on to play a role in this dysfunction of these cells. So now these cells, when they start to malfunction and all that, they don't produce enough insulin that is needed to remove this glucose from the bloodstream. So this in turn leads to accumulation of glucose because there is not enough insulin to act on the glucose to transport it out of the bloodstream and into the areas where it is needed. That is one thing that causes it. Then you can also have a situation where this insulin, even though it is produced in enough quantities, the cells and the tissues that needs this insulin keeps on rejecting it. That is, they resist insulin completely, and that is where you have this condition known as the insulin resistance. So your body keeps on rejecting this insulin that is produced, and what this signals, it tells your brain, interprets it as, yeah, so there is excess glucose in the blood. We need to remove this glucose from the blood. We need more insulin. So it keeps on signaling the pancreas to produce insulin. So while insulin is being produced, it is not able to perform its normal function of carrying this glucose out of the bloodstream because the cells, the tissues that needs it, they are not responding. They are not, they are resisting it totally. So this in turn, causes a situation where there is even high levels of insulin and there is also high levels of glucose. And then this, over time, like accumulation of this glucose is then what causes this diabetes mellitus. So I hope you've been able to understand the role that carbohydrates or sugar or anything you call it, I hope you've been able to understand the role that it plays in diabetes mellitus. So you don't go out tomorrow and tell somebody, don't eat this thing, don't eat this one, you will have diabetes. That is not the case. That is not the case at all, but it can actually be a factor in causing this diabetes mellitus, but it does not directly cause diabetes mellitus. So I hope you understood something from this video, and I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please share this video to people who you think will find it relevant. You can follow this page for more content like this, and yeah, please like this video as well. And yeah, thank you for paying attention.